Welcome back to Daily Dose of Hebrew Weekend Editions. We are working through 1 Samuel 3:10 today and the accents that are associated with it. So let's read through the Hebrew and then look at the parsing and translation. Let's read this together. Vayavo Adonai vayit yatzav vayikra chefa'am befa'am Shemuel Shemuel Vayomer Shemuel Daber Ki shomea avdecha. So for an overall translation of the verse, we get, and the Lord came and stationed himself, and he stood, and called as a time in a time. Now, this phrase gets smoothed out as at other times. 2 Kings 17:4 actually has a similar construction with the kaf followed by a bait. But the time domain is shana, a year, and it means as in former years, or as a year within a year, former years, something of that nature. Here we get as a time within a time, or at a former time, as at other times. So it's a little different here, but then we get after that, the Lord, we'll go back to the beginning. The Lord came and stood and called, as at other times. Samuel, Samuel. And Samuel said, speak, for your servant is listening. Now, the first verbal element here is the call imperfect 3ms of bo, meaning he came. The subject is the Lord, Adonai, and so we get the Lord came. The next vav consecutive is a hithpael, imperfect 3ms of yatzav, yod sade beit, again with Adonai as the implied subject. Now remember, the hithpael is the passive reflexive of the pl, and here we would get that the Lord stationed himself, or he stood there. Now, the next verbal piece is vayikra, and he called. It's the call imperfect 3ms of the root kara, kof, resh, aleph. And the next phrase, chefa'am befa'am, is a bit odd to us, we must say. And I mentioned earlier the construction has some parallels within the Hebrew Bible, but a literal rendering would be according to a time within time, or something like that. And the idea is that this is a time within time that has already taken place, or at a previous time. So I hope that makes sense. Here the phrase again would be as at previous times. For more on that construction, you can look at Gesenius section 118u and 123c if anybody wants to look those up as overachievers. After this obscure phrase, we then get the address, Samuel, Samuel. After the athnach here, we have the call imperfect 3ms plus a vav consecutive of amar, with Samuel as the subject now. And Samuel said, what did Samuel say? He said, speak. Here is the PL imperative 2ms of davar. Now remember that for davar, the base form is a PL, so we don't want to put any intensive nuance on the PL stem here. It's just simply speak. It's not something like speak wildly or something of that nature that might be an intensive. It's just simply speak. Finally, in this verse, we get the ground clause beginning with ki. The subject here is avdecha, your servant, and the verbal is a call participle, masculine singular absolute of the root shama, shin, mem, ayin. Now notice the furtive patach here with the R3 guttural. Remember that gutturals prefer patachs under and before them, something like the seglet noun na'ar with the ayin in the R2 position has a patach under it, and then also forces the segol in the R1 to become a patach 2. Here, the R3 guttural doesn't force the theme vowel to a patach, but it does get the vocalic glide into the R3 guttural in non-finite verbs, here a participle. So we have something like shomea. You get the roll into that furtive patach. Now, as a verbal adjective, we could understand the participle substantively as one who listens. For your servant is one who listens, something like that. Now, this gives a little more descriptive force to the verbal adjective participle, but at the end of the day, we would smooth this out in English as for your servant is listening. The durative nature of the present progressive English rendition captures the durative nature of the Hebrew participle in this case. And that will wrap it up for today. We'll be back next week for a look at the accents. Thank you for joining us today. Until next time, shalom.